Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This meeting takes place in the traditional and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are all treaty people. There's no additions or deletions to the agenda that I'm aware of. So we'll move right into the approval of the agenda. 4.1, recommendation that Committee of the Whole approve the agenda for the September 2nd, 2025 meeting as presented. Moved by Councillor Strong, seconded by Councillor Babineau. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carried unanimous. Approval of the minutes. Recommendation that Committee of the Whole approve the minutes from April 29th, 2025 meeting as presented. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Greek, seconded. Councillor Fullerton. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carried. And then we have the May 6th Committee of the Whole meeting. So that Committee of the Whole approved the minutes from the May 6th, 2025 meeting as presented. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Strong, seconded. Deputy Mayor, any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Motion carried. There are no presentations, and just for those of you, because we haven't met in Committee of the Whole a lot, Committee of the Whole is a meeting for us to discuss things that this is the first time a lot of us are seeing it. So there is no public participation during these meetings. So we'll discuss it tonight, hash it out. And if there's something you like or don't like and you hear it, you can come to the meeting on the next time it's on the agenda and you can speak at a public meeting at that time. This is sort of our time to hash things out rather than going to an actual meeting and looking at it for the first time. So that's sort of the idea of Committee of the Whole. So just to let you guys know. So correspondence is there. There is one item, and Paul, would you like to comment on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the item that is being brought forward is a request for a Veterans Memorial Crosswalk here in the community. This was to be a part of Remembrance Day within the town. I believe it was a request down by the memorial so that it would be representative of the community and those that can participate. The one note I will mention to council that Tyson and I have discussed this is there's concern from the Department of Transportation just on the placement of crosswalks and what crosswalks can be and what is recognized as crosswalks, noting that any changes to a regular crosswalk would have an effect on visually impaired or depending on what it is that you're using as paints or adhesives. It can cause slipping hazards or other trip hazards. So some communities are looking at this from a risk management standpoint. Now, most communities are processing and moving forward with pride walks, crosswalks, First Nations representation of Indigenous peoples, or again, something like this that is being asked for by the Legion. So I can risk mitigate here for you, council, but direction would still need to be given from you if you wish to proceed. It is a low to medium type risk. Again, it can lead to slip causes or other issues, but most communities do have them and do operate with them. It's just as long as they're designated in locations and well represented within your community, that's what most people are doing to mitigate it. Beyond that, if anything happens, if somebody does slip and fall, then it would be a call back to the town and follow up through insurance processes if that's the way to go. So in this, it's back to you, Chair, as to direction if council wishes to proceed or not.
Okay, so you've heard the possible liability. Like CEO Paul just said, most communities are doing some type of crosswalks of this nature, whether it's Indigenous, LGBTQ, or veterans. Bridgewater just approved one, and I think we could get access if we needed their template. They were the ones that sort of sent the request in, the Bridgewater Legion. So it's up to you folks. What's everybody's pleasure? Councilor Strong.
We're talking about mitigation and risk, and I'm just curious whether there's paint that's specifically made for this because slip and falls in parking lots on white stripes are very common, and then they started using a different type of paint. So have we even gotten that far in looking at it, or?
For you, Chair, I'd defer the question to our Public Works Director. Tyson I know that other municipalities have used different colors. We've seen different color used for parking lots, spaces, everything. Is there any concern within that level?
Through the chair, we haven't really got to that point yet. It just seemed with the concept, there's no gap, like it's solid paint from one end to the other. So if it's something, depending on council's direction, it's something that we'd want to consider for sure.
Anybody else? Anything? Councillor Greig.
Through the chair, Paul, do we have we reached the point where we have a rough cost estimate of how much these crosswalks would be?
Through you, the chair, we haven't fully investigated the cost. It depends on the type of crosswalk and how big. If it's a stencil like what was being represented in Bridgewater, it's going to have a less cost. I would have to defer it again to Tyson to understand fully what the costs are for the paint. But I think if it's a limited amount for a silhouette like they were proposing, I don't think it's that costly within that, correct?
Through the chair, as the CAO said, we're really at the preliminary stages here. Talking to another municipality, they sort of indicated between the painting and sort of the annual upkeep, it's sort of $2,500 or $3,000 a year per crosswalk. That I'm using the number I was given. I haven't done any of my own research into that.
Sorry, through you, Chair, just as an understanding that when Public Works is doing this, depending on the number of paints and the different types, there's extra work that needs to be for clearing the machines, for making each paint color. So it's not as simple as painting the crosswalks white like we normally do, or spacing them out. It does take more staff time and more effort to produce these. Not to say that they don't represent your community in some fashion. It's just understand there is going to be a higher cost associated.
Anybody else? Deputy Mayor?
Just with respect to mitigating liability as well, I'm wondering whether or not this is a question that's come up for the accessibility committee, or if there's any, our regional staff representative would comment on those, that there's ways to move ahead, but also mitigate any kind of risk and facilitate, people with sight issues, for example, or mobility issues.
Through you, the chair, we can look into that. So I know we were in discussions with different organizations, but we can address this with accessibility to see what they have to say.
Okay, Councillor Daphne and then Councillor Fullerton.
Through the chair, so is this the design that we would use, or?
That's the design that TOB is using, and I'm quite sure we could probably get the template. I've talked, Dan Hennessy hooked me up with the guy that's doing theirs, and I think we could get the template. And they were the ones that actually wrote us the request, because the Lunenburg Legion president was out of service for a bit. So anyways, but he's fully supportive of this. And the crosswalk that we were talking about was to go from TD to the old IGA, that one across there. And you really, you don't have to worry about getting hit, I don't think, there, because if you go straight through there, you're going to hit the monument, right? So it's not like I'd be a little bit hesitant maybe at the end of Lincoln Street there by Kinley, because you're going pretty fast down Lincoln. So you're going pretty slow up past the bank. So that's where I thought it would look. Plus, that's where everybody stands for the Remembrance Day service. So it'd be most noticeable. But I think we can get the template that they have, and then that would be a lot easier for us, because we wouldn't have to look for that or access it.
And through you, Chair, just as a note, communication is important within this. So if this is something council wants to proceed with, I think it's recommended that you would do at least a few weeks' notice that this is going to occur, that when it would be painted, and then to carry it through. If it's going to be something that's going to be kept up each year, then it's going to be traditional, and it'll fall into that realm that everyone knows and sees and recognizes. It will take time for people to adjust.
Councillor Fullerton?
I just wanted to add that in response to the Deputy Mayor's question, I'm going to be attending the Lunenburg County Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting tomorrow night, and I can certainly bring it forward on the agenda for tomorrow night. I can get some feedback and come back to this group.
So for now, since there are a couple of different questions out there, but it seems that we all seem to be interested, we just need some answers. So can we table this till we get some of those answers, and then bring it back to either council or committee of the whole in October and make a decision at that time? If that's, at least, is everyone fine with staff proceeding to get some more information? Because there's no sense for them proceeding to waste any more time if we're not going to do it. So what I'm hearing is we're all fairly interested. We just need answers. So am I correct? Okay, so we good to go there? Okay, thank you very much. Everyone good? Okay, you good, Tyson? You know what you need to get? Okay, so next is 8, business arising and unfinished, there isn't any. New business, number 9.1, snow removal policy updates. There's a recommendation there, but Tyson, you're up.
Thank you, Your Worship. This evening for Committee of the Whole, we have a snow removal policy updates report. So the recommendation of the report is that the Committee of Whole directs staff to bring forward proposed updates to the snow removal policy to clarify that the town will not provide snow removal services on any private roadway or driveway, and to formally discontinue the practice of servicing Bonavista Court and Canicle Road Extension. So the alternatives to that recommendation would be to make further amendments to the snow removal policy, or to create a bylaw or agreement system where residents of a private road can collectively opt in to town snow removal for a fee that covers the cost, plus markup to cover costs associated with equipment maintenance and other wear and tear. So the background on this item: the Town of Lunenburg Public Works crew currently salts, sands and plows 2 private roads and the driveways related with them within town limits at Bonavista Court and Canicle Road Extension. Ploughing, salting, sanding of these private roads and driveways occurs when residents call in to request it. Normally, sanding or salting isn't at the same time as ploughing. These items are separately requested by the private road owners. Typically, based on the order of priority in the snow removal policy, they're carried, the ploughing or salting, sanding's carried out once other town-owned properties or responsibilities are performed. And the town has been ploughing the 2 private roads since prior to 2009, so quite a long time. So the current snow removal policy makes it very clear that Public Works is responsible for snow clearing of town infrastructure, things like streets, sidewalks, town-owned properties, parking lots, but it doesn't include a specific reference to private roads. The policy certainly does say that the town does not remove snow from private driveways or walkways. But again, without this specific reference to private roads, the practice of ploughing the 2 private roads is continued. To remove any ambiguity and ensure consistency with municipal responsibilities, it is recommended that the policy be amended to clearly state the town does not provide snow removal services on private roads. So both the roads in question contain very steep hills. This requires the loader to plough, and typically the trackless machine, which is the sidewalk plough, to salt or sand with its studded tyres. In the past, there's been several instances where town equipment has slid off the road and into the ditch when performing any of these roles. And we're certainly aware of a potential risk to drinking water for the residents in this area if the equipment to fail or leak, as we're talking about wells here rather than the town water distribution system. It is important to note that there are other private roads within the town that we're not involved in snow removal with. So examples of these would be Hurdle Road and Duff Street. At times, public works staff gets called in to plough Bonavista Court or the Canickle Road extension once our employees are home from their shifts, from removing snow from the town-owned streets and infrastructure. This can create an added safety risk and fatigue for our operators travelling back to the armories, performing the task and needing to return home, often after a long shift of salting or snow removal around town. Snow removal on private residential roads in Nova Scotia is generally not provided as a standard municipal service. Typically, private roads are owned and maintained by individuals or associations of residents. Most municipalities explicitly state that they do not plough or maintain private roads to ensure public funds are not spent on privately owned infrastructure. Within the report, staff have performed research and several nearby municipalities, we've quoted their policies. Municipality of Chester says if you live on a private road, maintaining it is your responsibility or that of your homeowners association. Neither the municipality nor NSTIR plough private roads. Within the current town of Lunenburg snow removal policy, Section 1, the policy statement states that the town of Lunenburg will provide snow clearing services to all municipal streets, sidewalks, and town-owned or town-managed parking lots. Additionally, Section 9 on private driveways states that the town does not take responsibility for removing snow from private driveways or walkways. Therefore, the town's snow removal policy does not include the snow removal for private roadways and related driveways within public works scope. The current actions of salting, sanding and ploughing Bonavista Court and Canickle Road extension appear to be contradictory to our policy as it's written. In terms of the financial aspects, the charges for ploughing, salting or sanding within the previous winter, it was around $300 per call out. And then in terms of the communications, if council accepts staff's recommendation to discontinue snow removal on private roads, affected residents will need to be informed in a clear and respectful manner. The intention of bringing this item to council's attention in September allow you to consider it, and if the snow removal policies to be amended, it would give the residents opportunity to make different arrangements for the upcoming winter. That concludes the report, but if there are any questions, I can do my best to address them.
Thank you, Tyson. Anybody have any questions for Tyson? Councillor Fullerton.
Thank you. Through the chair, just so I'm clear, Buena Vista is a private road in its entirety, and Canickle is a public road by the school and Tannery Road, but as we go up the hill, it becomes a private road? Is that correct?
Through the chair, so Bonavista Court, where it comes off Tannery Road, yes, that is considered a private road. In terms of Canickle Road extension, we're talking about the piece at the top of the hill where Canickle Road and Schwartz Street intersect. It kind of goes up and around there.
Anybody else? Oh, Councillor Fullerton.
And again, through the chair, with the practice that has continued since 2009 for plowing this road as on a fee-for-service basis, is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. Have there been, notwithstanding slipping off the road and going into the ditch while plowing and sanding, are there any other access concerns, the width of the road? Are there any other operational concerns?
Through the chair, I know our public works crew have mentioned at times with the equipment, especially the loader, which is a larger piece of equipment, Sometimes there's been instances where trees alongside the roadway have impacted, sort of brushing up against the equipment and doing things like that. That would be the main instance I'm aware of.
Thank you for that.
Anybody else?
Hold on one sec here.
Oh.
Chair, I just wanted to bring up 2 points just so for clarification, so council understands. So I had our clerk look up here this afternoon, just a couple of the motions that were done. So on July 21st, 2009, a motion was moved and seconded that the town continue to plow the private road, including Mr. and Reverend Osmond's Buena Vista Court private road extension on an on-call basis at a rate of 125 per call out. As per the staff report, additional private roads will only be plowed on prior approval of council. The other note was November 10th, 2015. There was a motion by council to increase the fee per occurrence for town plowing, salting, and sanding approved private roads and driveways from $125 to $230 plus tax. And at that time, Mayor Bailey voted in the negative. So those were the 2 that were brought forward, and there were no other records of any other discussion. So it really comes down to roads approved by council and understanding the risk mitigation that staff are dealing with in roads that are not up to municipal standards.
Thank you. Anybody, you can't speak at this meeting, Terry, unfortunately. It's not a public meeting for that. We do have your letter that you wrote, and that was circulated. Anybody else? Councilor Strong?
This is mainly just to help me understand. So we do have do we have a bylaw about this, or why would these letters have been written?
Through you, Chair, we have a policy as it comes to the snow removal, which is in front of you. I think what has traditionally happened is that councils have approved the allowance of plowing on private roads, and each has become an individual decision of council, noting that there are 4 private roads from in town, 2 of them are not. 2 of them are plowed on an all-call basis. Concerns that come forward here are we looking at the other 2 private roads going to start asking for the same requests for plowing? Understanding that it would be an on-call basis and an additional fee with that, but right now there's 2 private roads that handle their own plowing of their own properties. So it's looking at a fairness aspect as well.
Okay, that was probably an obvious answer that I'd missed before, so, but I just needed to get that clear in my head. Have we ever looked at, through the chair, have we ever looked at limiting the hours for call-in, so that it isn't bringing in fatigue or that kind of thing for these 2 roads?
Through the chair, this is since I've been at Public Works, this is the first time it's come to council, this item.
And okay, so that's one thing. And of course, we're carrying a pretty huge amount of liability for the trucks and the vehicles to use them. So I understand. I'm trying to balance the equities here to see if there's ways around this and perhaps grandfathering these 2 roads, because I do see that they possibly in the future could become more housing off of them, or they may become at some point town roads. I'm not sure about the other ones. I think I recall Hurdle, but I think Duff is just a gravel road at this point. It's driveway, right? But it's the landlord takes care of that, or, okay, so I'm just trying to understand whether we could grandfather these in any way, and I'll ask that question through the chair.
Through you, Chair, it's possible as a discussion piece. I would want it written into the policy specifically for those 2 roads and those 2 roads only, if that is direction of council. One question I actually would have for Tyson is, how many roads are we clearing with the loader? I know it can be used for clearing sidewalks and like the piles of snow, but are we using the loader to actually clear roads?
Through the chair, the loader is typically used for a lot of the steeper hills in Old Town. So Callback Street, pushing up the other side of Public Works, like up around Kemp Street and Hobson, where the roads are quite hill, sort of up around Blockhouse Hill. they're the ones that would get the chains on and push up, and then up Duke Street from Montague, these kinds of roads.
So just an additional question with that, in terms of those hills and what we have for municipal roads, is it safe to say, because I haven't personally been up these sections of road yet, is it safe to say they're as steep or are those other roads steeper as it comes to, I'm looking at it from a safety standpoint of road clearing. So when we're using the loader, do you feel that it is still relevant to use to clear the sections of the private roadways? I'm looking for a comparative between town and the private road.
Yeah, through the chair, I kind of, it's not always apples to apples there, Paul, because it's on a call-in basis. We have control over how we maintain. We have our own control of how we maintain those roads. The private roads aren't always as frequently maintained the way that we maintain the streets, where it's up to the residents' discretion when they call in, and they are paying for each time that we visit. So I'm not sure how the grades compare, but sometimes it's not exactly the same circumstance anyways.
And just one more for clarification through council, through your chair. In the town here, we're dealing mainly with paved roads, wide roads, curbed roads. Is there anywhere else that we're dealing with within the town that would be dirt roads or other roads that are more subject to ground heaving or other issues associated with that are not up to municipal standard?
The roads that we operate are paved. Like there are turning places that are gravel and that kind of stuff, pull off areas, but we're not really plowing those areas. We're traveling through them.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Tyson. So this brings up a point of, again, risk management when we're dealing with this. The roads are not up to municipal standards. We don't know at certain times of the year what the condition is, could be underneath. We could be hitting larger potholes. Understanding that the homeowners are taking care of upkeeping the road. However, it's not up to municipal standards. We're not the ones taking care of it. This is where the more general risk and liability comes in with, should we be doing this? And is that fair? Understanding a grandfather system is a reasonable request. It's balancing out as staff, our concerns of equipment slippage. They're not up to standards. What happens if a shoulder gives out, at least if it's in a municipal roadway? We've risk managed it. It's been inspected. It's kept up. We're not inspecting private roadways in those situations. So that way we're increasing our liability and our risk with that. And that's the understanding of why municipalities do not maintain private roads or maintain plowing or anything with them, because the risk becomes too great or the potential for risk becomes too great. Understanding that there has been a good tradition of, at this council, you have to decide what that level of risk is if you wish us to continue. Staff are advising against it, but if you want to grandfather, we can discuss options of that. But I'm just giving you the level of what could or may happen. And not to say that there aren't private businesses out there that could operate and do these things for them. Obviously, there's 2 roadways in town that have somebody else plowing and changing those. So just as a FYI.
Through the chair, just to make a small correction to what I stated earlier, the area behind the academy, sort of on that's an area that's gravel that we would be responsible for pushing snow off, sort of around the backside of the building that faces onto the playground, and that'd be the west side of the building. So there are some exceptions there, but in terms of roadways, we're talking paved. Just thought that was important to clarify.
And one further clarification, Tyson, do we maintain or do anything else with those private roadways? The 2 in question. Do we maintain them in the summertime? Do we fill potholes? Do we inspect them? Do we do anything beyond an on-call snow clearing?
We don't fix potholes and things like that.
Thank you for the clarification.
Councilor Daphne?
Through the chair, I don't like the call-in. I've been the call-in after being out for, well, a few hours and then getting home and 2 hours later being told I have to go back out. I'm tired, I'm sore, and the risk for me injuring myself is greater at that point. I hate being called back out. Absolutely hate it. And I don't think we should be asking our guys to do a call out after they've been out for 8, 9, or 10 hours, because I've been there. And it's not fun.
Anybody else? Trying to, Deputy Mayor?
I think some of the conversation with that Paul raised were some of the questions I had, primarily about the differences between this the municipal standard that we would require to pave a road and to claim a road as ours and then assume responsibility for, and these private roads. And paved versus dirt, I guess, is probably the most obvious difference. We would require in a new subdivision or something that a road be paved in order to assume responsibility for that, if I'm correct. That's
Through the chair, it's things like the road surface, the road width, those kinds of
yeah,
things.
it's another one for sure. Yeah. And I guess I'm just looking at the language too, and it seems like we're kind of playing with semantics almost with when we're talking about, the policy already states that we don't do private driveways, but the difference between a driveway and a road is that there's more than one house on it, I suppose. Is that kind of the clarification that we're looking to make with an amendment here?
Through the chair, in instances we also plowed the driveways on the private roads because we're there plowing the private roads, and that's the practice that I'm not sure how long that's happened for, possibly since before 2009. So that's why it's included in the report.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to add or ask? Okay, I'll give my 2 cents worth, I guess. Basically, I'm old enough I was sitting at this table downstairs in 2009 when it came forward. And at that time, council denied staff's request at the time based on basically what they paid in property taxes. I think 2 of the 3 houses, or maybe all of them, have their own septic, which they still get billed in their taxes for. Sewer, wastewater treatment plant is in your taxes. So they're actually paying for a septic tax in their taxes that they don't get. And I know they know that when they bought or built. They pay their own street lights. They get no discount on taxes like I do. And just looking at the one street, the extension of Knickel Road, those 3 properties pay over $20,000 a year in municipal taxes. So like in 2009, my mind really hasn't been convinced otherwise that we shouldn't be doing this on a grandfather basis. I don't think we should look at doing any other private roads. I think we just grandfather these if we do it. The other thing is, I understand risk reward and I understand liability, but the world we live in right now in 2025, if we were worried about liability for everything we did, we wouldn't leave our house because there's liability on everything right now and you wouldn't get anything done. So personally, I'd like to see us look at some type of grandfather policy. It would have to be rewritten different than what's here. Because I don't agree with the other 2, right? Either like, I don't think we want to get into doing other private roads. So it would be a grandfathered basis, which isn't a recommendation, but that's my opinion. Again, I feel for these people. The other road, Bonavista Court, I have no idea what their taxes are, but they'd be huge because there's 3 houses on there. And the one that was just built is quite the house. So, I mean, right, again, I think that if you're living in town and paying town taxes, you get something for those town taxes, and they're not getting the benefit of 90% of the residents. Now, I understand where they live is the reason, and it's off the grid type of thing. But, I think we should look at maybe some type of way to grandfather these 2 roads and then change our policy that if we do get requested by anybody else, it's a flat out no. This was something we've been doing for 20 years and we're going to continue it, but we're not going to look at anybody else. That's my opinion. But like I said, it's only my opinion, and that's basically all I have to say. There is a recommendation in front of us. So if someone wants to move that recommendation, they certainly can. So someone prepared to move that recommendation or give staff some direction? Yeah, someone can make a recommendation or this recommendation, but we have to give staff some direction one way or the other, because the bylaw, the way it's written right now, doesn't make sense.
Through you, Chair, if council still wants more time and more feedback and information, direction can be that we can provide you more of that. If you want something of an idea of what this could be constructed of as a motion of grandfathering, give us direction like that without having to push something forward. If you need more time and you need more information, ask for it.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at the numbers, like if it's costing us approximately $303 a call out and we're charging them, or $308 and we're charging them $303, that's not a good business move. So we might want to, if we're going to grandfather it and continue it, we'd have to look at the actual costs, and like part of the recommendation is adding a 10% or some type of an increase in that. I'd support that, as long as we can, if we were going to continue to do it, we can't do it at a loss, right? But that would be my thoughts anyways. But what is the direction of council? Councilor Fuller?
I just have one other comment to make with that, and that is that if we ask the Public Works to give us a little more information in terms of some of the comments that Tyson made about the condition of the road, and of course the things you don't see when it's covered with snow, maybe that could be a condition of an agreement going forward. Is that if we made a rate increase that made sense and that was subject to the condition of the road being acceptable, then that is an option.
I think
Yeah.
you would just retain the right to refuse to plow if it wasn't maintained up to the specifications that we agreed to, right?
Okay, anybody else want to have a crack at suggestions? Councilor Babineau?
Not so much a suggestion, just I agree. I'd also like to sort of move in the direction of like some sort of grandfathered agreement, but with the policy being amended to not include any future ones. And then I do like the idea of like a modest rate increase. I don't know about right of refusal, but it wouldn't hurt to have that be brought forth in a staff report either. So.
Anybody else? Staff probably has enough now to come back with a more updated report, knowing the direction that some of us are thinking. And then that can be, I mean, these options can still be there along with another option, right? So everybody good with that? This is what committee of the whole is supposed to be all about. So Deputy Mayor?
I just think that it's a lot to assume to continue a practice that probably shouldn't have been initiated in the first place. It is out of the norm of what the town provides, and it is for not without reason. It is with good reason, I guess. So it is a matter of staff safety. It's a matter of liability. It's a matter of what our equipment is intended to do, and the surfaces on which they're supposed to operate. So it's all well and good to try to accommodate all of that in specifications going forward, but that it can get very convoluted very quickly. So I'd struggle to see how to grandfather these, and also to fairly look across the road at my neighbors who have a private road and don't get their road plowed by the town. And not that they've asked for it, because I don't know that they ever have, but it's an issue of fairness as well for me. So I'm just putting it out there at this point. It's fine to get more information, and I'm happy to have a look at it again, but I'm struggling with how this could continue in a way that is reasonable for the town in general.
Hey, anybody else? We good to wait for some more information to come back? Okay, all good. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to 9.2, Sustainable Infrastructure Fund Grant Program, Revision of Street Service Extension Policy. Mark, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Excuse me. So today I'm hoping to take away any discussion points or input related to the grant program for street service extension cost sharing as part of the commitment to CMHC and its Housing Accelerator Fund agreement. So to avoid any confusion, there is currently a street service extension policy in place, which includes related processes and procedure. And the proposed policy would not be changing the elements of the policy related to the street service extensions themselves. But we're looking to finalize elements that are specifically related to the idea of cost sharing between developers and the town. There's an existing provision within the policy related to cost sharing, which limits requests to 50% or $300,000 of related work. And to our knowledge, that provision has not been used to date. And over the last year or so, any requests for cost sharing were put on hold until the establishment of this fund. A little bit of background as part of the half commitment. There's 2 commitments related to establishing a program that disperses funds, and this including this one, and an affordable housing grant program, which will be brought before council soon. There's 2 other programs, one which Kayla will discuss shortly, that provide financial assistance to developers, however, do not require the establishment of a fund. So aside from the understanding that there's 2 grant programs as part of the commitment, some considerations to keep in mind are that the town has received 1/2 or about $580,000 of the total funding to date and has only spent approximately $33,000. The town must also spend its funding by January 2028. And also to note that half money does not necessarily have to be spent on the commitments agreed to as part of the agreement. It can basically be used to fund anything that supports housing. Staff have incorporated in the draft document that consideration be given to projects in the realm of accessibility and affordability when determining clear public benefit. So tonight, staff are looking for input on some of the following questions, including preference for screening the requests. As it is, it would be on a case-by-case basis, or is there a preference for a set interval once or twice a year at specific times, that kind of thing? Staff currently advise case by case be given that it gives opportunity for a fulsome evaluation against the criteria over time and then possible reallocation of funds as a result. Also, the expectations are that requests will be generally limited and likely larger in scale to necessitate extension of services. Requests under a certain amount could be reviewed by CAO with staff. Just things to keep in mind. Is there interest in limiting requests to multi-unit developments in residential development, which could be useful as a screening tool for projects that are unlikely to have a clear and broad public benefit? And then specific things like how much money should be allocated to start with? Should there be a cap on the dollar value of individual requests? Should the cost sharing percentage be limited to 50% as it is now? And staff also recommend reviewing program uptake over time to determine if funds should be reallocated, given that half use of funds is time sensitive and there may be potential for other opportunities that could benefit from the funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody have any questions or comments to Mark?
No questions, but do have some comments. I know obviously you're looking for feedback, so I'll just give some. I personally prefer the case by case request timeline. I think especially in the early days of something like this, that makes the most sense. And it's something that we could reevaluate if that's working for us at a later time. I like the idea of keeping the contribution limit at 50% and opting out of a hard limit. Again, both of those, I guess, as like something that could be reevaluated in the future. It's just really hard to say with something like this where it's so new, or this version will be new. I personally prefer the idea of just being a little bit more cautious in the early stages and then going from there, because if we find we're not getting a lot of uptake or the type of uptake that we want, we can always make changes in the future. So, and then I do like the idea of ruling out single family units as well. So.
Okay, anybody else? Deputy Mayor?
I do agree with the comments that Councillor Babineau made. And in addition, just wondering are there other communities that have adopted a similar policy that we could refer to as a template or a guideline, because this is all kind of new territory for us.
Through the chair, so I did do a bit of a scan to see what's out there. There are a few. There's not as many as I expected. 50% seems, that's the highest as far as the percent in cost sharing that I've seen. Yeah, that's sort of the extent of my knowledge, anyways.
Anybody else? Councillor Fullerton?
Through the chair, I agree with the comments made in terms of case by case, rather than at set intervals and the 50% contribution. I mean, I don't know what to think about setting a cap because we haven't set it in motion yet. I think that first step would be to put it in motion by allocating that recommended $200,000 and see where that takes us. That's just my instinct on that. But then the only other question that I had with the step down for the tax relief, the recommendation was, I believe, somewhere between 10 and 20 years, and staff said 15.
Sorry, and through the chair. Actually, that for the step down, that'll be the next one that Kayla's going to speak to. Yeah. No, it's okay.
Okay, anybody else? I'll just,
Through your chair,
you
can
go-
I just
yeah,
put one out there for you? If council is interested in spurring other development beyond private, so if you're looking at nonprofit, for example, the 50-50 split might be a little more difficult when it comes to nonprofits. Would council be willing to look at maybe a 75-25 to initiate nonprofit development? Just putting it out there as a thought process for you to consider.
I personally think if we have like a co-op come to town and want to take over a property and put housing in, and you have to upgrade the infrastructure to do it, and it's nonprofit through a co-op system, I think we should look at, upping our ante a bit. It's not a private developer, but I think 50% is perfect for a private developer. And I like what my colleague said, the case by case, I think is a great idea. I like the 50% on that part. And I do like ruling out single unit development, because when the accelerator fund came through the system there at the feds, I don't think it was ever created for single unit dwellings. When we ended up getting the money, it was for housing in units, right? So again, I like all the recommendations that are made here with maybe some tweaks, but I'm excited about this part getting to the next step, because I've been saying for 2 years now that we have money that we were given by the feds, that there are developments out there that are looking to build. So if we don't have water or sewer or even probably electrical to them at this point, this is money we can access to get it. And it's not really our money, right? It's federal government money, right? So, and at 50%, it shows some commitment from the developer as well, because they got to ante up 50%. So they're not, they're serious about it. If it's $500,000 infrastructure project and we pay $250 and they pay $250, we know they're serious. They're not just going to put infrastructure and then walk away normally, right? So I do like the recommendation. I'm glad we got to this point finally, and I'm actually going to be more excited when we actually have someone apply and we can actually use this down the road, right? So there is no recommendation. So what's the next step on this?
So through the chair, so I'll just draft some of the for the discussion tonight into draft policy that would be brought before council at a future meeting.
Excellent. Everyone good with that? Okay. Thank you very much, Mark. Now, the next one is the affordable housing tax relief, which is Kayla.
Yeah, thanks. So similar to the last one, tonight we're looking for council's direction on this affordable housing tax relief policy. So this is also one of the Housing Accelerator Fund commitments, specifically to use tax forgiveness as a tool to encourage more affordable housing. So this proposed policy is aimed at developers who are either building new housing or converting existing buildings. It's really designed more for medium and larger projects where a tax credit can make a more meaningful difference. Smaller projects like secondary suites will be supported through a proposed grant policy that you'll be seeing in the future. So to move forward with the final drafting of this policy, there's a few pieces that we're looking for council's input. So things like the incentive model, credit structure, length of commitment, number of units, and the definition of affordability, all of which are outlined in the report, but I can go over quickly those chunks. And so forgive me, some of it's a little finance formula, but I'll try to explain it. So there are two main options for the incentive model, which is Model A, which ties the credit only to the affordable share of new tax growth. And then there's Model B, which gives a credit on the whole increment, so not just the affordable units, but again, just that new tax growth. And then there's also Model C, which would exempt the whole property tax. We're not really recommending that. It is an option, but it would have a major fiscal impact. Another thing that we'd be looking at is the credit structure. So that's what Council Fullerton was talking about in terms of, would council like to see a flat rate? So say if you wanted to look at giving a 90% tax forgiveness, do you want to see that locked in for 10, 15 years? Or a step down scale where maybe the first few years it's at 90%, then it goes down to 75%, so on for the allotted commitment time. Which brings us to the term of the commitment. So when we're talking about affordability commitments and incentive commitments, a really common number we're starting to see is 15 years of affordability. So those affordable units are locked in for 15 years, but the incentive also typically has to match it. So if you're asking someone to commit for 15 years of affordability, typically we'd like to see some kind of incentive. So whether that's, again, full flat rate for 15 years or a gradual decreasing, that's something to consider. The next part of this policy that we're looking at is the minimum units required. So staff so far were recommending that it would be at least 3 or 20%, so whatever's higher. So minimum, there would have to be 3 units, affordable units in these projects. But then again, for bigger projects, it would have to be that 20%. And then the last part we're looking at is council's comfort on the definition of affordability. What we've tried to do here is really mimic what the federal government has said for the definition of affordability and also the province, so that we are not coming up with necessarily our own definition that wouldn't align with federal and provincial funding focused on affordable housing. So this looks at 30% of what a typical renter household earns, or at least 20% below the average market rate. So we acknowledge, I think council has talked about this before back in January when you were first looking at it, that these numbers aren't perfect and they don't necessarily capture town of Lunenburg specific numbers. So what we're hoping to use is provincial numbers when we have it, but as council is aware, you've all agreed to look at a joint housing market study with MODL. So we're hoping those will give more localized numbers, which could be used in this formula. So the policy would set out to say when we have local numbers, that's what we'll use, but recognizing those could become outdated. So going down the hierarchy of local when we have it, provincial numbers, then federal numbers. Because right now the numbers that we use are Western zone, which doesn't accurately reflect what we're seeing. So that's kind of the 4 big chunks of what we're looking for council to discuss. So if anyone has any questions or wants to go through any of those things again, that's what we're here for.
Okay, just like last time, who wants to kick us off? Councillor Babineau.
Just copying question from the last item we were talking about. Is there any sense of what other communities are doing, the ones that are offering any sort of tax relief program?
Yeah, so what we're seeing a little bit more is that like grant program. So that would be more for like secondary suites and smaller developments, which is something that is in the HAF initiative. So that'll be a separate one. Again, this property tax forgiveness is something that municipalities across Canada have been kind of experimenting with to different degrees. This, what we're proposing, kind of mimics something that CBRM, Cape Breton Regional Municipality, is doing. However, recognizing the development that they see doesn't match the development we see. So they're a rural municipality that might be putting in, you know, apartment building. That doesn't realistically match what the town of Lunenburg is seeing. So trying to make it a Lunenburg policy that will actually be utilized.
Okay.
Anybody else? Deputy Mayor?
Um, this is one of the requirements of our commitment to CMHC. Are there parameters that they put forth in their requirements of us that says we have to do it over a certain time or certain limits, or do they give any parameters at all, or they just suggest this is one way to incentivize?
To the chair. No, basically the extent of the commitment is to establish incentive through tax forgiveness, but there's the details aren't actually set out specifically.
And just following up on that, I think it's prudent to do some kind of step down over a term, and 15 years even seems like a really long time. You know, a decade it's a nice round number in my mind, just because you don't know what you're committing, you know, your future selves to. And the definition of affordability is a tough one. I don't know how we rank when it comes to like the provincial numbers or the federal numbers. Like, are we, and by we, I guess I'm referring to the number we know now, which is the whole.
It'll change when this report comes out.
Pardon me?
It'll change drastically when
Yeah,
this
that's
report
what I'm,
comes
and
out.
I'm wondering in what ways. That's been stated, and I know that our numbers have been skewed in the past because of our seasonal residents and things like that, who kind of tilt things in a way that isn't kind of what is actually seen. So I don't know how that's it. And I think that was accommodated for in some of the numbers that were most recently presented, but things have changed drastically. The whole population has changed drastically in the last 5 years. So it's important. And a lot of those, the newer population is, you know, service industry workers and so on that we see everywhere that are new residents. And so I don't know how they capture that. And I don't know where we are with our local study that's supposed to be happening.
So Mark would be able to provide some about the housing study, but in terms of that average market rent that we were talking about, so right now when I said we're using the provincial numbers, again, we get lumped into this western zone. So that's like not Kentville and everybody west. There we go. So they're essentially saying that the average rent price of a 3-bedroom apartment is $1,200, which is exactly, which might be for, I don't know, a very rural community outside of Shelburne, perhaps. And again, that's the numbers that we're getting lumped into with what is the average market rent. So I think realistically, we all know around the table that 1-bedroom apartments in Lunenburg are going for $1,600, or it varies. But again, once that housing study is available and has more local, that will be able to set us of what is realistic, and like from a developer's point of view, but also from a renter's point of view, what is the real picture of the situation here, and not a tiny rural village outside of Shelburne.
I think that housing study, because I think the reason they did it was because people wanted more accurate numbers. And I think some people in the area thought it was going to help housing prices, but it's not. It's going to make it actually worse, because when we get the actual real numbers from Lunenburg, Mahone Bay, Bridgewater, and close proximity, you're going to find the rent, if you base it on real local numbers, which we'll start doing at that point, is much higher here than it is 60 minutes down to the southwest, right? And that's what we're getting lumped into. So I honestly think the housing study was done all in good will for a reason, but I think it's going to backfire on renters. That's why the developers are so anxious for these numbers to come out, because if they have to offer rent at 30% below our rate, well, right now 30% below a 3-bedroom is like $800. Well, how could a developer build a new build and offer a 3-bedroom for $800 in this area, right? It just doesn't work. So when they get the real numbers from this area, they'll be able to charge more technically and qualify for all these incentives. So it's going to benefit the developer more than it will the renter, unfortunately.
So is there no accommodation for what the actual incomes are? I mean, isn't that what determines affordability?
Well, that's the national, it goes by a national average, and that's 30% below whatever, but that rate, I think, is a 1-bedroom is like $1,800 or something, the national average. It's really high. So then they decided to go provincially because it was lower, and they put us, because we don't have our own, so they put us in with all Western, whereas some other areas in the province have already did this study, so they have their own rate. So that's why we're doing ours. But no, that doesn't go by, for the developer to qualify for this. That's who's getting this money, the developer. So for the developer to qualify for these funds, they have to go by the formula that they come out with. So it's going to, these new formulas and all this is going to benefit the developer more than it is the renter by far, I think, in this area especially. Good.
Me? Okay, I have a quick question, because all of this is getting very confusing to me. And I've been talking to other landlords that are just as confused. Mark, can you, or through the chair, can staff tell us what the basis is of the measurement? Is it 5 units and more that they're looking at? Or because Lunenburg would not be, you wouldn't be able to tell it all in Lunenburg, because I think our biggest unit is up on the hill there. And I don't think you could take that as a baseline for what the town rentals are, because we're talking about people renting their entire house for $1,500, $2,000, right? But is it true? I'm hearing this in the community that it's 5 units and more that the measurement is.
Through the chair. So that's not my understanding, but I've kind of heard bits and pieces of that too. But I don't know what that's grounded in. So I did just recently receive a bit of an update that from the consultant work that's going on as far as report outline. They're still doing some data, some engagement to collect data and that kind of thing. And there's still room actually for input like this if it's not quite meeting what we would need for the town of Lunenburg. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm in agreement with the mayor that this could actually make affordability a really big crisis in the town of Lunenburg instead of what we're trying to achieve. If the litmus test is somewhere else, it seems to me that it's at odds with what we're trying to achieve in the big picture.
I honestly think there's a number of flaws in the whole program with the accelerator fund. They came out with an accelerator fund quickly to solve the housing crisis, which quite frankly was built more around big urban centers like Toronto, Halifax, the big areas that made perfect sense. And a lot of it is us sitting here tonight trying to make something out of nothing because it's never been done in a small community before. And we can only do what we can do. But once they get those numbers that we all partnered in, that $50,000 study, then those are the numbers the province and the feds will make you go by, because that's why they want those numbers. So I think, unfortunately, if we did that study in thoughts of bringing rent down, it might have been a fool's errand, really, because I think it's going to backfire, because we're getting lumped in, like I said, no disrespect to other areas of the province, but we're getting lumped into 3 hours and 2 hours down south of us, where rentals and properties don't go for what they go for in Mahone Bay, Lunenburg, Maiders Cove, outside in Bridgewater or outside. So that's what's going to happen. So I could be wrong, and maybe I'll be shocked when the numbers come in, but I would be really shocked if I was shocked when the numbers come in. So I guess we won't know that till later on this fall, but for the policy purpose, that's one of the options we have. Or you can go by the federal standard, which is, I forget what the formula is, but it works out to be, I think a 1-bedroom is like $1,700 if you do the federal formula. So again, that's certainly not affordable in my opinion in the town of Lunenburg. Like, you're talking 1-bedrooms for the most part would be rented by like the deputy mayor said, like service workers now, they're not going to afford a $1,700 500 square foot single bachelor pad, right? So I don't know where this is going. I think it was money that was given to communities to solve a crisis, and I think it worked very easily and very well in big urban centers. And I think we're running into this issue. I think we're not the only community running into this problem, trying to come up with something that was never done before. So I want to thank staff, first of all, for what had to be countless hours to put this together, because it's very detailed and very confusing. So thank you. But again, I do like, and if you want to talk about the report, I like Model A. If you're going to do anything, Model A would be the only one I'd consider. And the fact that you only credit the affordable units, so you don't get a tax break. If you build a 50-unit building, you get a tax incentive on the 20%, so that would be 10 affordable units. The other 40 you pay full tax on. Why would we give a tax break to somebody that's charging 20-some $100 for a rental unit? And the step down scale I like, but I definitely agree with the deputy mayor. Some of us, probably me, won't be here in 15 years. So 15 years seems to be a long time. So I'd like to see that capped at maybe 10, and, you know, just maybe speed up the increments a bit, that you get down to that 15%. And a couple other notes that I had, I do like the affordable units of 3 units or 20%. That I was fine with. And again, that's a starting point of what I read and got out of it. I don't think, again, this is applicable to small. Quite frankly, if I want to build a tiny home in my backyard to move my son into, I don't think I should qualify for this. Quite frankly, that's not what wasn't the intent of the accelerator fund when it came out. I don't think, the way I read it. So those are my comments about the whole thing.
Through you, Chair, just a point on your last comment there about number of units that this should qualify for. You know, we're talking 3 units, or, you know, to get that incentive, you know, you're ending up building 10 or 12 units out of it, right? So I think there should be within that at least a stipulation of 10 units and above that you would qualify for this, because we are talking another incentive program coming down the line for, you know, like the grant incentive that we were discussing earlier for accessory dwelling units, or, you know, to build smaller density. But perhaps that's something else we look at, is maybe this is tailored towards larger development. But again, can also be revisited if you're not seeing uptake into it, and then you can flex and lower the levels if you so choose.
Councillor Fullerton.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point, Paul. And also, the step down tax relief, is there an opportunity there, as we talked about in the infrastructure program, where we could offer a more generous tax relief or a longer term for tax relief to not-for-profits that want to do a development, as opposed to for-profit private developers?
I think that we should write something in the policy that nonprofits get looked at differently than private developers, whatever that may be. I don't know.
Yeah.
Kayla, you're putting your hand up. Go ahead. You're trying to stop.
No, so they fall in their own category. So this is a new thing under the Municipal Government Act, where this is targeting specifically private development. There are mechanisms already in place in the Municipal Government Act that would allow us to look at not-for-profits under a different lens.
And again, I think that this is a great first start and a great tweaking, because we have to have a lot of these things in place by certain dates, or we possibly get clawed back some of the funding we've already received. So if we can make this work, and I'm not saying it works perfect, but if we can make this work in some sense, I'd hate to give 1.1 million back to the feds, right? So if we can make it work and use it in some which way to benefit the community and help with the housing crisis, I think it's a benefit. Again, we are, you know, I think we all around this table have to be very, very aware that when those rental numbers come out for this area, I think some of us could be in for a rude awakening. Councilor Strong.
One last comment on the step down is that depreciation really starts at 10 years. So I think that the schedule should probably take that into consideration, because I think it should be made, the window of opportunity should be made smaller, because you're going to be getting into capital appreciation, and that's pretty big, right? So I'm not actually sure how you do that. I would like to see a few other examples of how that step down schedule is in other places. I know Truro has quite a few of them. Like they also do talk about the co-op model versus the private developer model and, you know, allowances for things like that. But I really do think that the longer you have a step down schedule, the more you run into the total rehab of the building, because these buildings are not, new buildings don't last that long. So they're going to be stuck. I guess I'm saying I would probably, if I was a developer, I would want it the other way around so that by the time year 15 comes along, I get a 90% credit so that I can replace all of the heating appliances and things that are capital, right? Anyway, that's just my thought on that.
So are we, the staff, have the right information to go from here?
I think we do your chair, but is there any other comment from counselors?
Anybody else? Councilor Babineau.
Well, I was just going to chime in a little bit on the affordable definition conversation. So I think having more accurate numbers, even if they're scarier, still helps. Because as much as like if I were to lose my rental day, I pay well below market value, well below. I'm very lucky, knock on all the wood things. If I were to try and find something comparable right now, I would be looking at 1.5 to 2 times what we pay in rent. And so to have 30% less than that potentially available is, I mean, any reduction is good, right? Is it where these rents should be? No. But I think if we're thinking like, oh, outside of Shelburne is $1,200 a month, so this will make it $800. I don't think we'll have anyone trying to use this program because they won't be able to build the building for those prices. So I don't know. I would agree as well. I like Model A and the step down model and the minimum 3 or 20%. So I'll just add that in there too.
Anybody else? Deputy Mayor?
And I'm just trying to clarify too, in my own mind, how they're defining affordability, because it seems through these policies that they're asking us to develop, they're defining affordability according to what the market has available at the current time for housing, right? Without any consideration for what the income of the people in a community can sustain, yeah, what they can actually pay, which seems completely bizarre to me.
Well, the whole federal system, I'll just give you so rent relief or rent assistance to a senior. If you make over 21,000, I think it is, or $22,000 a year, you don't qualify for any rent assistance if you're a senior, for example. I know that's like called, right? $22,000. So you try living in 2025 in the town of Lunenburg and say you make $22,100, so you don't qualify for any rent relief, and that doesn't get considered, and you don't qualify for these rent relief units you can possibly get back of town. So you're on your own to find a place to live and pay the rent. So the system is flawed in more ways than one. Unfortunately, the 7 of us aren't going to fix that, right? But the federal government with their housing crisis and their housing rent numbers, it's a huge problem, and they don't want to, I'd say, get to the crux of it. And I would have rather seen when these things came out that they increased more funding for the renter than the developer. But this was all development based to get development happening quickly. And they forgot, in my opinion, the renter during it. And I have no idea what the solution is, but you're 100% right, Deputy Mayor. It makes absolutely no sense that none of the formulas that we're looking at using is based on what people can actually afford to pay, because nobody seems to care, quite frankly, in the feds.
So again, the way that the models are showed in many of the different funding streams across federal and provincial, this is what we've been stuck on. And what makes it hard, as Mayor Myra said, is the household income limits are being considered, but the choice is left to the developers of whether they want to look at the market area rate, which they're almost always going to pick because it's better for them, or the Nova Scotia household income limits. So we do have some of those numbers. So it's essentially saying province numbers. You have like $62,000 for a 1 bedroom. So 30% of that, or yeah, 30% of that. 2-bedroom, 73,000, 3-bedroom, 84,000. So these are the numbers they're looking at the province, but unless it's mandated that you will only use these household income limits, which again, this area market rent seems to be the product, like the dominant one that we're seeing. Again, balancing, so a little bit, to go back a little bit too, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but like the whole point of the Housing Accelerator Fund too is units. It doesn't necessarily have to be affordable units. They wanted to see more and more. So a policy like this, the intent is it's still going to be attractive for developers to come and put in more units, but that we're making sure that at least a little chunk of them meet some kind of affordability standards. So again, that's not answering your so council could make a decision to go more strict and say we're only going to look at the marker like income. However, and again, we're talking about different systems with what does the province say and what is the federal. So looking at stacking that funding can start to get a little bit messy. And then what is actually attractive for what makes it worth it for them to come and develop, while still us trying to ensure there's a little tiny part that can remain affordable. So I don't know if I answered your question.
It's a very slippery slope, and I sound like I'm preaching, but there's a reason that development keeps increasing and more units keep getting built, yet more and more people are on the street living, because people come by and they buy old apartment buildings, they gut them, they fix them up, and then they can charge whatever market rent is. So the people that were living there paying $600 a month rent because it was the person owned it for 50 years. Now the new developer has to put all this money into it, and they get renovated and they get fixed up. And I mean, we don't have to look far to see what's happening around us. It's happening all over the place. And I don't know what the solution is, but they haven't tackled that problem. They've increased the benefits to the developer to a point, but they haven't increased the benefits to the renter for the most part, for the average working Joe.
Maybe the room for negotiation with the developer is in the step down schedule, because if we're giving 90% credit in the first year, first and second year, that we should be getting something in return from that, for that, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know. I'm having trouble with it because it seems like all of the money is flowing to the developer, and we are seeing people falling through the cracks on the other side of it.
Anybody else? Councillor Daphne.
More so just a comment for my colleagues that when it comes down to crunch time, I want you to remember that our residents in our town comes first, developer second. I know we need development. I get that. But if we allow developers to come in to do whatever, we're not going to have a Lunenburg like we do. So when we're looking at this in the future, keep in mind the town and the residents. Developer second.
Anybody else? Okay, so staff should have an idea where to go. Do you know where to go with this? Awesome, you got it. Good. Okay, so it'll be back to the table. So now we're moving on to 9.4. Thank you very much for all your comments. And we tried to solve a federal issue here tonight, but we didn't succeed quite yet. Maybe, you never know. Take a couple more kicks at it. There's 7 of us, just like the legislation. But anyways, move on to 9.4, prioritizing the motion action list. So basically, staff wants us to go down through this and basically let them know if it's a yay or nay, or if we can put her back in the skew somewhere.
So through you, Chair, if you don't mind me asking staff, if you guys want to leave, you don't have to stay. If you want to go home, see your family, you're up to you if you want to stay. I'll leave you that option.
It's like 400 degrees.
That's toasty.
I thought I was.
Yeah.
Let's have a quick recess because this will take a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, quick recess, everybody. Okay, we'll go back to the meeting. So we're on 10, notice of motions, information requests, council reports. So notice of motions we're on. So you all at the back of your agenda have these notice of motions. The staff's going to take us through them, and we're going to let them know if yay or nay, or middle of the pack, whatever,
Yeah.
priority. So Paul, if you
So,
want to.
yeah, thank you, Chair. So council, to understand better what your priorities are and what the priorities of staff can be, we need to go through this notice of motion. As there are several here, stuff that's been sitting on the books. We need to determine at least now what you would like to see in 3 months, what you'd like to see in 6 months, and then what's basically going to sit in the sandbox, which is this, until we're ready to start knocking some of those other priorities off the list and go from there. So as you see in your package, you do have the list. So I'm going to just put it out to council. I want you guys to speak freely on these. But the first thing I want to do is, are there any of these motion action list items that are not a priority to you at this moment in time? So I'm talking motion of time, the next 6 months.
Well, I mean, some of like, so the very first one, really only. I mean, the first one on the list, the target date is before the next intake period. So like, I would say that's not super high priority because we have the better part of a year. Yeah, but more than 6 months out is what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need that till like what, April. We need that. We should really have that for the budget time because this year we were way late doing the
True.
grants. I mean, there was things that were already done when we finally got back to people. I think people thought they didn't get anything because they didn't hear from us. So this number one has to be done by April. I would say April, May at the latest.
Through your worship or chair, sorry. It's something else we have to consider is in your discussions, when you discussed the grants before, you wanted to know a percentage of the budget that you wanted to potentially allocate. So I think it has to actually be like as part of your operational discussions. So understanding, I'm going to encourage council to look at capital first, get that passed, and then look at operations. So we're probably talking February, March. So if council's okay with that timeline, I'd probably mark it as a BC at this point. So a little later, but something that can progress forward.
Yeah, that'd be great because I think we've all talked at how we give out less on an $11 million budget than we gave out on a $6 million budget. So that has to be somewhat looked at, you know.
Mhm. Your mic.
We did have this, just to back up a little bit, we had this because we had concerns at the last minute in divvying up the funds under the policy, and we found that the policy itself was really awkward and especially awkward for new staff. So I think did we strike an ad hoc committee that was going to look at it and try to change criteria and stuff like that so that it would be more understandable?
Yeah, so through the chair, a little bit of background there. So the ad hoc committee kind of came up from council's discussions and wanting an opportunity to review. So ad hoc, I would recommend that if council wanted to continue with that route of having a grants committee, that would be a discussion to have in terms of striking that as a formal committee of council, and then you could appoint people through that.
Strike that as a formal committee in February so that we're ready for March for the budget stuff.
I'm just looking to see for clarification from Councillor Strong. You thinking that the committee would do kind of what we did this year and just preview the applications to provide a recommendation to council, or look at the policy?
My understanding was that there was a number, there were numbers assigned under, like, you got points based on.
The current policy they changed a year and a half ago,
Right,
2 years
and it
ago.
really
And it was
hard to work
point
with.
based. It was like a algorithm, whatever system, a key system. And this council and some of the other council didn't really fall all over that system, but we went with it because it was late in the process and we went with it. But I think we all agreed that we didn't like the system. So we have to review that policy and come back with a new policy if we're not going to use it. So this year we quite honestly didn't follow our policy. And we met as an ad hoc committee and decided how to divvy out the grants. So maybe what we need to do in early January, February is form a committee to review the policy and make recommendations to a committee of the whole meeting on what we see as a new revised policy. So that's where I see this going. And I think that out of that, we can also come back with a recommendation of how much we think the budget should be for grants. So if in a $6 million budget, you gave $45,000, and on an $11 million budget, you gave $45,000, it doesn't make a lot of sense. One budget was whatever, 8% of the budget, and one budget was not 8%, a lot less, like 4%. So again, I think that that's what we should look at doing. But if that's what you're thinking, then we should help staff with this, and maybe early in the new year, look at forming an ad hoc committee. Is everybody okay with that?
I think so, because especially when we're hearing people presenting from the public, we have a clear idea as we're moving into the next stage of the process. Running out of air. I'd like to see an ad hoc committee continue with it.
Would we want, sorry. Would we not want to see the proposed amendments from a staff perspective initially to then respond to? Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe, and whatever the ad hoc committee would be, I would think it would be prudent to have 2 or 3 counselors and a staff person. Quite honestly, I did feel bad this year because it was, well, one brand new staff counselor and a brand new employee that started like a month or and a half earlier sitting on the grant committee, right? So no, so do we want staff to work on this, come back with something in early in the new year, and then we look at forming an ad hoc committee? Everyone good with that? Yeah, no. And then the next is the marketing levy. I think we've already.
I would put that as an A only
Yeah.
because then we can get something going only for the fact that April 1st is going to come fast approaching. You'll want something so we can have consultation with the public and those that are actually going to be most tied to the short-term rental, or sorry, the marketing levy bylaw. So I would almost mark that as an A, as I had marked it as staff. So just confirming that's council.
No, I agree. I think this is something we've talked about for years. It's long overdue. And I think that Paul, we in our meeting today had said that staff's getting ready to draft up something to send to the Board of Trade now, so they can let their membership and we can let our people know that this is something that we're working on, and we're hoping to have it implemented by April 1st, 2026. So then people with short-term rentals can adjust their Verbo or Airbnb or whatever it is, their booking.com amounts at this point. So we give them a heads up because people are now booking for next year, obviously. So good, everyone good making that a high priority? This next one, we have to do something about. It doesn't seem to be very high priority, but after the mass casualty report, everybody has to have a police advisory board. So us and Modal. So Paul and I are meeting with who?
We're going to be meeting on the 12th with the Department of Justice and the minister to go over some of the RCMP points of view and discussions. I'll also note I actually met with the other CAOs last week on RCMP, just the new process they're using to identify needs and like officers and outlays for all the communities here. So they are working on that. We'll probably see something in October, maybe early November, as some of the results of that, because that's going to actually have an influence on your budget based on, you know, it's going to identify, do we need X more officers here? Or if it's not officers, is it things we discussed were like officers now in a mental health call have to stay with that patient or that client or person even at the hospital staying there. Is there a way to transition to somebody being at the hospital that can liaise and take those so the officers can come back on duty? Like there's a lot of moving parts when they were talking about this model that they're working on, but I think it's going to be important to really get an idea of what are our critical needs, how are they critically responding, but then also how are they participating in the community? So that's like going into our schools and talking to students or being more visible in the community. That was something that everyone said from their communities was just visibility. Now I'll note there is pretty high visibility here because we do have the detachment out, but and they are driving through town. Some of the more rural areas, you may never see an RCMP officer because they're community facing and following those standards. So there's a lot more to this, and I think we'll have more information after the 12th.
We are meeting with Modal on the 12th at the same time. Modal's meeting with us where we're talking about a joint board. We thought it was, might as well meet together with them, it's all on the same page. The next is short-term housing report. This is one that in my opinion, is fairly important. I think that that's part of our problems that we have here in a small community like ours is houses that are purchased multiple by some individuals and have no intention of anybody living in them, just using them as Airbnbs or verbos. And it takes housing out of the housing stock. And it's not what I feel a suburban residential neighborhood is supposed to be about. The house next to me isn't supposed to have someone different living in it every second night, right? And it doesn't. I'm just using that as an example, right? So, but I think that that's something we should look at. I think a lot of communities are looking at that right now. So I'd love to see some type of report on that, but
Through you, Chair, just give me 1 second. Kayla, you were mentioning that the province has a registry for all short-term rentals. That includes hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, the vacation rental by owner, Airbnb. I believe we had talked about the number is 37 in our area, if I'm not mistaken. And out of that 37, I think 11 are like Airbnbs or Verbos. Everyone else is at an actual business, correct?
Yeah, we see more, the majority in Lunenburg are those traditional hotels, like that's the full-on business, not a basement suite or something like that.
I think you might be shocked at how many Verbos and Airbnbs there are in Lunenburg that aren't registered. And if you come out with a rule or something in place, it would be up to the people in the community to report those. But I can certainly tell you a few on Main Street that aren't registered, that there's different people coming and going all the time with suitcases, so they're not visiting, right? And parking their car in the same spot for 3 days and then leaving. They're VRBOs and they're nowhere to be registered. So there's a way to catch those individuals. And I think the fine is substantial if you don't register. So, I think that's something that we can't be afraid of trying. And if it doesn't do anything for us, it can't hurt. It can't hurt the system, the situation. Myself personally, I think it only help our housing if we enforce it a bit better.
Perhaps there could even be some efficiencies of work, tied into the marketing levy where they are similar discussion pieces.
So back to you, council. What level of priority do you classify this? You want something within the next 3 months, as it's going to be relation to the short-term, or sorry, the marketing levy bylaw or process as well. This ties back to your land use bylaw and just within that scope. So do you consider this an A within 3 months, B within 6 months, or greater than 6 months?
First, I think we have to have it almost simultaneously with the marketing levy and have it by spring, because it's not going to, we're not going to see the magnitude of it again now anymore this year until May, really. You have another month and a half left of it, and then they'll be sitting vacant. All you gotta do is drive through Lunenburg in December and see all the vacant homes for the most part, and those are verbos for the most part.
Okay, no, thank you, Chair. We'll bring that forward as in tandem with the marketing levy, as well as make it a priority within the discussions under the land use bylaw as to what you would consider short-term rentals and if you want to start restricting those or not. So
Short-term rentals are 30 days or less. Right, so we'd be following the provincial short-term rental policy, which is 30 days or less. So, yeah. Next one.
the Sustainable Infrastructure Fund.
Yeah, good.
So I think we're working towards these items. So I would say it's already an A. It's within process. I would almost just make it an A+ because we're already discussed items and are going to continue to bring that forward.
The next one, NSUARB. Okay, that was a thing brought forward by.
I would probably mark this as a C, but I will also have a conversation with our managing director and remind him that he needs to follow up if he.
Yeah, I don't think we've heard from him.
Yeah.
Since the last council, so it can't be high on their priority list at this point.
Yeah, and I did already speak to him about it once, but I'm not sure where it went from there. So yeah,
we can touch base.
Okay, and the next one.
Council, I would recommend this to be a C at this point in time. I think you're going to have too many other priorities of staff to look at this. It depends on the level of archiving you're really looking at and to what extent that you can go from everything from the way we're doing minutes and archiving them now to a hermetically sealed room that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to create. My recommendation is if that's something you really want to look at, then that's a level C. We should look at a budget or future. I think there's other priorities here that staff can bring forward to get council wins on the board.
Quite honestly, this was a pet project by a former counselor that was going to do it
Mhm.
and look after it, and that counselor's not here anymore. They were sort of going to take it on as a personal project. I don't know if he's reached out, so it should be very low.
So then at that point, council, do we want to strike it from this document here? Not to say that we'll put it in another file for future reference to bring back. If it's something that, 6 months down the line, we can review this, bring it back if it's something you want to consider at that point or more, or strike it completely at that point. So we're not getting rid of it. It's just not on this priority list at this point. So is anybody seeing it higher than 6+ months? Okay, we'll move it to another file.
Okay, next is paid parking infrastructure. Yeah, I think that was something I brought up the last council, that if we're going to enforce the meters like we do, we should be looking at some type of a new updated 2000 and this generation parking system, because nobody has changed on them anymore. So
Through you, your chair, I don't disagree based on what I've seen so far and how the process is going with meters, with the struggles of enforcement and ongoings. I wouldn't disagree. Maybe this is a level B. At least give us time to do some research, see what other options are out there. We understand hotspot is out there as an option, but I think there still needs to be a combination of that and the meters, or if we're transitioning to like a more digital based system, which would be actually, I can tell you, finance department would love that. And I think everybody's ears in the town hall would love that as well, as they're doing change and work. So my recommendation would be a level B, at least gives us some more time and we can pace out some options for council to review.
it sounds good to me. What everybody else? I think whatever we do, we have to remember the community we're in and the average age of our residents, because sometimes I roll the dice in Halifax because I can't figure the system out. So depending where I park, so you got to be user friendly, whatever we do. Property standards, dangers, and I'm scared to go here. An unsightly premises policy. Anybody have anything they want to fire?
Nobody complained about my lawn that wasn't mowed from July because I was afraid to kill it. And the grass was this high, so I'm still kind of curious why we're pursuing it. It seems like it does, take up a lot of energy.
Just say, from chairing my first meeting as mayor ever and having this on the agenda, that I don't want to go down that path anytime soon, because it wasn't nice. It brought a definite divide within this room, and it was nasty, and most of it was uncalled for, but it was from both sides. It wasn't just one, it was both sides. So to my knowledge, it was September 2023 this started, and we haven't heard a thing about it that I know of in a year. Have you?
Oh, if it's okay with you. Yeah, so just a little bit of background. With the previous council, this all came to a bit of a head. And Shania can confirm I haven't heard anything about it this year. We get so few and far between for unsightly vegetation complaints. Like I think in the last several years, there's been about 3. One property in particular, we issued a remedial order saying this is unsightly. They came back and they issued an appeal, which went to council. In response to the appeal, council didn't make a decision at that time. Instead, they instructed staff to look at a policy that would allow or have some kind of parameters for lawn naturalization. And then as that moved forward, it kind of evolved into something a little bit different. So again, looking at the priority of, are we seeing a lot of complaints? Is this a big issue? Does it require its own policy? Probably not, if I'm being honest about that. But that still does the limbo of one person did appeal, nothing ever happened with that appeal. So it's still kind of sitting in purgatory a little bit. Again, we haven't heard anything about it, but it opens up the door for the next person who wants to appeal potentially again. So does this need to be really reactive to one thing, or is it just a policy upkeeping to look at some kind of parameters.
I actually, what I see, and I drive around quite a bit in the mornings, it was new 2 years ago. Like there was 2 or 3 people doing it, and it annoyed people that lived in those areas. Now it seems to be more common. People are doing it a bit different approach a lot of places. I mean, I can certainly speak on a property next to me, and quite honestly, I hated it 2.5 years ago, and I'm coming used to it now, and I really don't care. I don't, and it was sort of a personal thing, quite frankly, at one point. And I don't know if we want to get involved in that at this point, because I don't know where the rubber hits the road. Because you can put a height restriction on it, but then when we had 25 centimeters, I think, or 25 inches, 25 centimeters. Like, how do you mow 25 centimeters? I want to see the mower that actually you can adjust to 25 centimeters. How do you do that, right? So you either, I think this is something we don't want to touch unless we absolutely have to. Myself personally, I think we have enough things on the go that this is just going to divide the community once again, which we don't need.
Through you, Chair, I think it's important for council to understand really what the dangerous and unsightly premises bylaw is really supposed to be about. It's not about lawn naturalization. It's not about long grass. It's really about, is a house decrepit? Is it falling down? Is it going to cause a danger to somebody if they're not going in? For example, let's say a house catches fire on the second floor. It gets doused with water, it's condemned. How long is that house going to stand before the town's going to step in? Understanding, somebody might not have paid insurance, or, that everything was in that house and that was it, right? Like, how are they going to proceed? And I've dealt with several of these in other communities and processes. The goal of a dangerous and unsightly premises is to focus on those types of situations. Looking at, if you want to look at lawn naturalization, or you want to look at how tall grass is. I mean, if we want by law enforcement to go measure grass, okay. But my recommendation with that would be something separate that you work on as a policy to develop within that. Dangerous and unsightly premises should be taken as that is. Are we looking at a demolition? Are we looking at a derelict? Are we looking at, are kids going to go through here and climb through the building? Are they going to fall through the floor? Those are the types of scenarios when you're looking at dangerous and unsightly premises. And that's the type of level the province puts on as it. So just to give clarification as to what you're really looking at in terms of how you want to look at policy.
Yeah, this was a lawn mowing bylaw, plain and simple. It had nothing to do with dangerous and unsightly premises. It became very personal, and it was. I don't think we should go there anytime soon.
So we can move to the sandbox for now.
Yeah. We'll move on to the MPS amendments. Yes.
So this is extremely important. So what we have found in discussions with Mark, myself, and Kayla is just a couple of aspects here. Process is one that we really need to update here as to how packages and how developers are approaching council. Right now, it's kind of willy-nilly. Who does it go to first? I'm going to give the prime example of the Foundry development here, okay? And it's just an example. It went through a 1.5 years of process. It never actually was presented in front of you to council because it's a rezoning process. Within that, it went to PAC, it had a PPM. It was really disjointed. Generally speaking, in order for, and this comes where it comes into development agreements. What we want to do and look at is creating a package that developers have before they even get to the point of council, so that developers, do you have a site plan? Do you have visual concepts? What are you requesting for water, sewer, power? Checking down the list. What are the variances? What are the setbacks? All of those things to allow staff the time to review and provide the developer feedback. That way, once we can get a wholesome idea of what their development is, what they're going to be requesting, we can use a development agreement process that ties a partnership between the town and the developer to say, okay, well, now council, if you want this 60-story or 60-unit apartment complex, well, note, you're going to have to prioritize the power, water, and sewer for that in your upcoming budget if that's going to pass. So it actually gives council a really good stepping stone and a really good background. So developers are prepared to approach council. Staff are prepared after reviewing the documents and basically pre-drafting development agreements, key points of interest within it. And then it can start going through the process where it comes to council for presentation. And then you dictate the next steps and how long it's going to take. things like going to PAC, so going to your planning advisory committee for an opinion. So this is not PAC hosting a PPM. We're separating that out so that it's separate processes. PAC is being asked by that board, is this development reasonable? Is this what they're presenting package a good idea? You know, are we talking parking requirement? All of those types of things. That opinion goes back to council. That is not the public going to PAC and presenting that. From that, you host a separate PPM that's led by staff, where the developer can present, staff will be there to gather the information and then report back to council. So it's about slowing the process, but as well as spacing it out so that we're doing it in logical steps and everything reports back to council in the end. And you can decide from there what other directions you want to go, what other things we're not including in that. Within that as well, I know we've discussed a staff key priorities, and one of the key priorities was development agreements so that we're all on the same page. But within that, I understanding one of the main things we need to get through right now is a parking requirement. With a zero parking requirement, it's not an effective way to manage a car-centric community. I understand active transportation, I support it. But at least every family and household, in order to live in rural Nova Scotia, you need at least one vehicle. I like car share, I like those kinds of concepts. And this is something we can have a more wholesome discussion about, but I think you're gonna have to look at something that is still within the realm of 0.75 to 1 parking space per unit, so that you are still covering yourselves, because think about this. If you have 20 units and you have 15 parking spaces, where are the other 5 going to park? Because not everybody's going to use active transportation or car share. But beyond that, where are the guests going to park? Beyond that, how much congestion do you want on your town streets? So it's a more of a wholesome discussion. But I think these are the types of things we need to bring forward and more of a priority. I think what I will go back to your main priority. Your second priority was your MPS, your LUB, your CCP, your like all of those. So this seems to be a growing priority for council. I would recommend at least some of the amendments we start discussing within the next 3 months.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that yeah, while you're doing, you're going to solve more than one problem on this list. So I think that's great. And then, pardon? This would be an A. And then the next one was brought forward by the last council, because quite frankly, I don't think anyone understood what it said, but the Main Street form out in Victoria Road is a weird form. So it was done to create housing, but then it was also done, you had to have a commercial, the first floor had to be commercial. So there's a developer out there that wanted to do a 3-story housing development that's a couple hundred yards off the main road. And they couldn't do a 3-story housing development because they had to do the first floor had to be commercial. Now, if you put the first floor commercial where that building is, you might as well just, whatever you spent putting that first floor is just wasting your money, right? So we would have to put 4 stories in, make the first floor commercial up in a field, like off the main road somewhere. So that was put in with the idea Main Street form was supposed to be like some other communities in Nova Scotia, but it doesn't seem to fit in. So we had asked staff to come back and revise that. So that's where that came from, because it is hindering possible development on Victoria Road, for example, right? So that, I think, quite frankly, again, falls in with a lot of this stuff, but I would think it would be an A as well to review that along with when we're doing the LUB and the MPS, because again, that was one of those things that I think we're put through thinking it was for a CCP and an LUB and an MPS that were supposed to create more housing opportunities. This actually took away in housing opportunities, in my opinion, with the way they wrote it. So is everyone good with that being zoned in with the same sort of thing in A? Okay, the next one, who wants to, that's definitely an A.
Yeah.
Cornwallis.
I will ask, Cornwallis Street, is this an A for council or is this a B? Do you want to take more time or are you wanting to push this forward?
It's a priority as far as its importance is concerned, but time wise, I think there's a lot of other things that are going to have an impact on how council proceeds with this, like the whole input of Parks Canada into what our designation or how our designation should be recharacterized to include the important component of our history in that there were Indigenous people here before colonization. And that speaks to the whole idea of why we'd be renaming Cornwallis Street in the first place. And I think to attempt to rename it just to check a box is a mistake, and it doesn't speak to what the whole reconciliation process is supposed to look like. And I was offended, frankly, by the way this whole thing rolled out back before I was involved in council, and I would like to see us reset and have a look at what should be done to do right by Indigenous people, and not just think we have to name a street and we'll be done with it. So I don't know where that puts it on your list, but
Councillor
that's the way I
Babineau?
feel about it.
I'd also like the opportunity to run this by the Anti-Racism and Diversity Committee, which is meeting next week. So I'd like to sort of bring that forth because I think that somewhere in the process, I'd like to have that committee's feedback. It's very new. We've only had one introductory meeting, so I'm not sure when the committee would be able to sort of give us any sort of recommendation, but I'd like to at least bring it to them and see what that kind of looks like. So
Yeah, I think that again, you talk about ad hoc committees and this and that and other things. I think this is something that we should really look at. If we're going to do it, we have to do it right. So maybe forget everything that was done in the past because it was flawed. It was many mistakes and errors made with the last process we used. And I think that if we're going to do this the right way, then maybe an ad hoc committee. I know Councilor Strong has shown interest to do something on that basis, and we have to have everybody, and it has to be all inclusive. We have to have Indigenous people on that committee, and we have to have their input, and we have to have parks involved. But again, if we're going to do this, just changing the name for the sake of changing the name, I think is not why we're doing it, and that's what the last process I think put us through. So again, I think that maybe be 6 months because it's going to take more than 3 to get this put together and do it right. So maybe if we put that as a B, and maybe that's something we look at in the new year, forming a committee, and at that point, I know Councilor Strong has some contacts that she might be able to reach out to and get some people that might be willing to serve on that committee, because I think that was the biggest problem with the last committee. So.
Through you, Chair, just a question here. There sounds like there's 2 separate items here. One sounds like the Cornwallis renaming. One also sounds like reconciliation and process. So understand they can be tied together, but I think at a larger scale, you might want to look at an ad hoc committee of reconciliation and process. And maybe this is something that is fed through that, because it sounds like there's more, from what I've heard from council, that it's not just this, that there's more olive branches, more work to be done.
If I can just say 1 or 2 things, that the last process that we went through was very painful. It was painful for the community. It was painful for the Indigenous community. It was painful for council. It was just across the board a total mess. I would use stronger terminology if I could. But this is also an issue that I go to sleep thinking about and wake up in the middle of the night thinking about, and thinking about how we can work together with the province and the feds in developing an educational program for the town, because I think that was a part of the whole thing that was missing. And I would be really lucky to be on an ad hoc committee that would look at this anymore. So that's all I can say.
And through you, Chair, just an example. So in St. Andrews, what we did was we struck an ad hoc group. We worked with our local Indigenous First Nations because they actually had access to other funding and educational opportunities, to which we opened the door to them and had them do their teachings and them do their processes, as long as it was supported and it was led that way. It worked very well, and amazing the reception from the community that wanted to learn. We did everything from drums to dream catchers to still hosting a reconciliation day on I think it's the 29th, if I'm not mistaken, pardon my dates. or the 30th there of September. So like those things where you gather, you remember, you learn, and those are things we can look at. And I think that's from a greater lens of that group is what kind of Indigenous teachings and learnings can we do within the community.
So we'll put this as B for now. Okay. Housing market study we're doing. Right? Okay. Parking traffic study recommendations.
Well, through you, Chair, you had a study done. I think there was concern that I've heard from counselors on it about just the parking and review. I'm happy to look at it further, but maybe we put that as a C for now, or do you want to sandbox that?
I would think that would be a C or sandbox. That should go where most of our parking and traffic studies that we've done over the last 15
Well-
years went.
Isn't this one specifically the one where we're working with the province about Frank's Auto, like that corner there? So this is like a very specific recommendation that came from.
The one at the four-way stops.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever they
yeah.
are. Okay, yeah, so this
I
is,
mean, I would say maybe a C still, but definitely not sandbox.
yeah, we should meet with the MLA and Mayor Elspeth Wall, because it's in the municipality, but there's two intersections coming into town. One you probably come through every day, the northwest one, which is a four-way stop, and the other one is a two-way stop out by Frank's. And there's been a lot of very bad accidents in those two areas in the last number of years. And we just felt that the province should come take a look at that. If there was anything to do, they did have rumble strips at one time and they got rid of them because the residents didn't like the noise, I was told. So, you know, if you're ever going to put a roundabout coming into Lunenburg, those would be the two areas that have a lot of land and you probably could do it, right? And that does slow the traffic down. But anyways, I think that's something we should look at. But again, it's like a C probably. And then on-site parking, that'll be done with the LUB and MPS. Zoning changes to Salt Meadow. So where are we on that?
So through you, Chair, we're actually working on getting a notice out for PPM at the end of the month. So hopefully we'll be bringing that report back in October for council to continue looking at that process.
Excellent. Affordable housing policy, we talked about that earlier, did we not? Okay, so that's an A, obviously. ICOMOS Canada letter, we wrote a response. What more do we want to do on that?
I guess if there's a follow-up from ICOMOS, do we just want to have that included as correspondence at an agenda or in an agenda package?
We can, it's up to council.
Hold on, through you, Chair, did we receive a response back from our response?
No.
So sandbox.
It's obviously not a high priority for ICOMOS. So we'll move on to washrooms at Lunenburg Academy. I think that has to be a B, but we have to know by budget time for sure what we're going to do up there. Again, council, we do have a report on it of our options. Maybe we can meet with the academy, but I think that should be a B at the very highest. I mean, with the roof costs and everything else, I can't see us spending a whole lot of money and putting an outdoor washroom facility up there on top of that, but that's just my humble opinion. Reducing speed limits, we're in the process. We've already sent that off to Department of Highways, did we not? Okay, so we're waiting for a response. Traffic and parking study budget. Oh, that was what I thought we talked about earlier, but we're going to work on that, I guess. That's really, yeah, that's a B.
You want to B? I would put BC just because we just don't know, or we need further discussions.
Yeah. No, excellent. And
Sorry, through you, Chair.
Through the chair, the first two items, there's 4 dot points there. So the first two have been brought back to council already. The third and fourth one yet to make it their way back.
excellent. So we're working on that. C has been, or the next one has been done, or we're working on. Buffer zone and rescinding a motion. So there is a motion, notice a motion made by Councillor Strong to remove King Street out of the surplus land thing that we're waiting a report on. And we've also talked a bit to Paul recently, the deputy mayor, and I, and we want staff also to review how Blockhouse Hill was put into surplus land because, we're not 100% sure everything was done with public input and processed the proper way at the time. So we want to make sure everything was done right. And then this council can look at removing it from the surplus land at this time, and we can always look at it down the road. But we're in the process of removing King Street once we get the report back. And again, I think we have to look at how Blockhouse Hill was done and whether it was done right or not. And if the public was actually given the right, opportunity to, I guess, be engaged. So that's where we are. I know, let's go, Paul.
I was just going to suggest maybe a B because I need to get caught up on some of these, as well as it's probably going to take a little bit more time to get some of that information. So I want to make sure we get an accurate report back to council.
No, that's perfect. I mean, if we're going to remove it, we want to make sure, we don't want to make the same mistake that was made putting it in. We want to make sure we take it out the right way as well if we take it out. So, and then the next one, excuse me, I have no idea where that is. Anyone want to? Oh, I remember the presentation. It was a really cool presentation, but
We're standing on every corner taking pictures of the fish. It was amazing. I hadn't really looked at it until Eric.
what are we supposed to do on this? He
I
was
think
going to.
it's in his hands at this point.
Yeah, I thought Eric was going to contact staff and talk to them, but he hasn't contacted anyone, has he? So I'd say that would be a C at the
I want that C or sandboxed.
C. At least it's still on the radar. And then election signs on public lands, that can be at C because there's no election coming up for a while. Well, we hope.
By-election could happen anytime.
We're not having any by-elections, hopefully. And then there's these other four were fairly new to the table. So some of these were brought up basically, to be quite honest, our ad hoc grant committee said, yes, we do certain things that maybe we shouldn't have said, yes, we'll do certain things for, because we didn't know we didn't do those things. So again, a policy moving forward would be great for the banners. I do apologize to Tyson and staff for just saying, yeah, in kind, we'll hang those, no problem, was sort of what we said. So sorry.
See, we should have had him on there.
Yeah, exactly. And the review of the hack and trolley, that can be a B. We don't need anything there until spring because that's behind us. Live streaming meetings, we have to have an A because we have to have an answer for that because every time we have a meeting, we don't live stream it. Facebook is really entertaining. I think staff is on that to come back with some recommendations. And then the last one.
So through you, Chair, this comes back to the request that came in at the last meeting. This is about the back harbor, the water quality and the processes there. Tyson and I are already going to be meeting with the Department of Environment sometime in September once we can arrange a date. But this is you're probably talking still probably a B level. Like it'll be still working in the background until we've got further information. But this is going to be more us, the province, and modal as part of this discussion. And we want to make sure we're providing council and the public with accurate information based on our facilities, what we're doing, and then what's happening downstream. Looking at maps from what I've seen, are there things like farmers' fields that are having, influence on the runoff? Is there anything else down the stream, straight pipes from modal, or, is there anything other industrial that's down the line that we're not seeing? But that's where this needs to be a greater discussion, and it's going to take more time. So I'm recommending probably a B to C, but it is something we're going to be working on in the background until we have some more information for council.
Yeah, I think B makes sense, but I said it 25 years ago, and I'll say it again. It's hard to say we have a clean front harbor or a clean back harbor when the province and the feds made everybody in the town of Lunenburg hook into a wastewater treatment plant. But anyone that lives 5 minutes outside of town, they were allowed to straight pipe in. And to my knowledge, they still can straight pipe in, unless the house sells. I think then you have to do something when you sell the house. But if there's family homes, like for First Peninsula, for example, or Hospital Hill Road that have been owned by the same people for 40, 50 years, they still straight pipe into the harbor. So technically, we never have been a true clean front or back harbor, but for whatever reason, that has never been enforced. Now, the Lahave River had a school child do a project on it, and it got a lot of publicity, and they come in with a program to fund it, and the Lahave River is all off grid, offline now. So I think that there's something we have to work with Modal on and the province and the feds. And I don't know if our plant can handle their stuff or not. But I think that until they actually stop straight piping it in certain areas, this is always going to be an issue. I mean, it's getting better on Hospital Hill Road because most of them houses have sold and done work. So a lot of them have septic now, I think. But First Peninsula, a lot of the whole homes are still old family homes.
Sorry, may I ask, is it, does staff know if it's actual law that, and maybe this is something Councillor Greek knows from his professional life, whether or not a house can sell with a straight pipe system legally, if that's allowed?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe it is required. If not, it would be a great difficulty for a sale to go through with things such as financing and insurance with a straight pipe system in place.
So it's more business requirement than a legal one. So our province has still not made any legal requirement that this be looked after, but because it may impede a sale because of mortgages or whatever, it's an issue. So I have a problem that the province hasn't stepped up what seems to be a very easy point of enforcement with the sale of a property to make that obligation, because that's at the crux of it as well. And yeah, I just think it's important that the role the town of Lunenburg has played has been a very significant one with wastewater treatment over the past 15 to 20 years. And that we keep being tarred with the same brush as those who have not stepped up in the same way is unfortunate. And I think in this case, actually, an unfair reflection of reality. And that should be clarified at some point.
I agree. I think some kind of a post or a public statement, once we find out that we're definitely not feeding raw sewage into the front or back harbor, I think would be adequate. And I feel that we're going to spend, after this newest upgrade since 2000, we'll have spent close to $14 million on a wastewater treatment plant to not dump raw sewage into the front and back harbor, along with how much annual fee every resident pays to upkeep and maintain that facility and staff it. So our residents since 2000 have been paying $500, $600, $700 a year, whatever it is on our tax rate, times 25. So 700 times 25 is $15,000 we've each spent in taxes over 25 years, say, to maintain that wastewater treatment plant. Yet if you live 20 feet outside of town and don't hook into that system, the province seems to think it's okay to straight pipe the same raw sewage into the front or back harbor. It makes zero sense to me, makes zero sense to most of our residents. And I really don't think the residents of the town of Lunenburg or the staff or us should be taking heat over something that we're doing everything in our power to eliminate, yet our neighboring properties haven't been enforced to, so most of them aren't. So I think that's where we should sit down with the province and the feds if it's a federal thing. That's what LaHave River was, a three-way thing.
It
And
had
look
to
at
be.
and look at how to do it, because I think that we're getting tired again. I agree with the deputy mayor. Yes, for 100 years we put raw sewage in the front and back harbor, but we're not anymore. So we can't get blamed for something we've done 25 years ago. And this year was an extremely dry season, so the back harbor is lower than it ever was. So you can actually see some straight pipes in the front out here. If you go look, straight pipes out from buildings of where the sewage is coming out. So again, I think that we have to formulate some type of a press release or announcement down the road to let people know we're doing everything in our ability to eliminate anything and to alleviate that problem. And we should not be tarred by the same brushes some others are, because I don't know what more we can actually do as a community. Like $14 million for a town this size in 25 years, plus your annual upkeep is substantial. And yet there's no pump station on First Peninsula and there's no pump station on Hospital Hill Road. So it's either septic's personally run or it's going right into the harbors. It's that simple.
It's a complicated jurisdictional mess. It really is, because the La Have project involved the province because the river was coming inland and it stopped like 20 feet from my cottage because that was federal. It was in the ocean, right? So nobody wants to take responsibility. It's just going around in circles constantly. But I agree with the deputy mayor that we have put up with a lot of abuse over the summer and over the years for things that cannot be attributed to us.
And through your chair, that's the goal of this, is hopefully, like, our goal as staff is to make sure that council gets the full benefit and the public to know that we have a good system in place. And from what I've seen so far, it's a really magnificent system, that we're doing absolutely everything we can to make sure the water quality is great. But when you're dealing with tidal forces and, to your point, other jurisdictions and other areas that can have influence pretty quickly, again, the goal is to educate that it's not us, and that's our goal. And we'll bring that report or any information back to council so that you're made fully aware of what we found.
Thank you. So that's like a B, I'd say. So, okay, so that's the priority list. Everybody good? Yeah, it's good we went through that because we've ignored that list now for 8 months. So it's good to go through it and see where we are on things. And it kind of neat to see how some of the things all tie together, quite honestly. So if nobody has anything else on that, we have nothing in closed session. So a motion for adjournment. Okay, moved by Councilor Strong, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.